Zaria was 69 when she first noticed something strange. It wasn't a dramatic collapse or a frightening diagnosis, just a quiet moment one morning after breakfast. She had eaten her usual plate of papaya, something she'd always believed was good for her digestion and gentle on her stomach. But that day, her chest felt heavy, her breath came shallow, and a wave of nausea crept up unexpectedly. At first, she thought perhaps it was the stress of an unsettled night, or maybe the heat of the day. Yet the feeling lingered, and it left her unsettled in a way she couldn't ignore. Later that week, sitting across from her doctor, Zaria was surprised by what she heard. The papaya itself wasn't the problem, it was what she had paired it with. She had mixed it with a creamy yogurt, something she thought was harmless, even healthy. But her doctor explained gently that sometimes the right food, when combined with the wrong partner, can change entirely inside the body. Instead of helping her digestion, the fruit she trusted so much had triggered discomfort and stress in her system. Zaria listened, confused, even a little betrayed by something as innocent as her favorite fruit. I share her story with you now because I know how easy it is to overlook these quiet signals. As we age, our bodies become more sensitive to the little details, how we combine foods, the timing of our meals, even whether a fruit is too ripe or not ripe enough. What Zaria thought was a simple, nourishing choice had in fact turned into a burden her body could no longer carry with ease. And she's not alone. Many seniors find themselves puzzled when the foods they once trusted begin to feel heavy, unsettling, or even risky. But here's the hopeful part. That doctor's visit didn't end in fear, it began a shift. Zaria realized that small adjustments could restore the balance she was missing. It wasn't about giving up papaya or any fruit she loved. It was about learning how to enjoy it in a way that truly supported her health. She began to see food not just as nourishment, but as a daily conversation with her body. Each choice could either ease her path or weigh it down. And with just a few mindful changes, she discovered a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in years. When I think of Zaria now, I don't picture the worried woman sitting in that clinic, confused about her own breakfast. I picture her in her small kitchen, slicing open a ripe papaya with a smile, knowing she understands it better now. She sprinkles just a few seeds aside, saves them for later, and takes her time to enjoy the bright orange flesh without rushing. There's a confidence in her movements, the kind that comes when you've learned to listen to your body again. She no longer fears that something so simple could bring harm. She knows how to let it bring her strength. And that's the story I want to share with you today. Because behind every fruit, every meal, there is a choice that can either support us or set us back. Zaria's journey is a reminder that even the smallest habits hold power. When we understand them, we don't just avoid discomfort. We unlock the quiet joy of aging well, of living with ease, and of finding strength in the foods we choose each day. Zaria had always believed her mornings were the healthiest part of her day. She'd wake before the sun, tie back her silver hair, and step barefoot onto the cool tiles of her kitchen. A papaya sat waiting on the counter, bright orange against the pale light. For years, she had made it her ritual: slice it open, scoop out the seeds, and pair the soft fruit with a spoonful of yogurt. It was light, easy, and carried a sweetness that made her feel cared for. Yet one morning, everything shifted. After finishing her plate, she felt her chest tighten, not painfully, but enough to make her pause. Her stomach churned uneasily, and the familiar comfort of papaya became a source of worry. She brushed it aside at first. After all, she thought, isn't papaya supposed to be gentle? But as the hours passed, a lingering heaviness clung to her. That evening, when her daughter stopped by with groceries, Zaria mentioned it casually. "It's strange," she said. "I've been eating papaya for years, and today it just sat in my stomach like a stone." Her daughter frowned, setting down a bag of onions. "Maybe it wasn't the papaya, Mama. What else did you eat with it?" Zaria hesitated. Just yogurt, something she thought was harmless. But that small question planted a seed of doubt in her mind. The next week, Zaria sat in her doctor's office, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't expect much, perhaps reassurance that it was only stress. Instead, her doctor leaned forward and explained softly, "Papaya is good for you, yes, but when you combine it with certain foods, especially dairy, it doesn't always behave the way you think." He spoke in that calm, deliberate way that made Zaria lean in closer. Yogurt, he explained, could neutralize papaya's digestive enzyme, papain, making it harder for her stomach to process proteins. Instead of helping her, the mix created gas, heaviness, and discomfort. Zaria listened, her brow furrowed. How could something so small, just one combination, make her body react so strongly? That night, lying awake, she thought back to her mother's words from long ago. Not every food belongs together, her mother had warned when she was a girl, picking guavas in the orchard. Back then, it sounded like old superstition. Now she wondered if her mother had known more than she realized. Food, it seemed, wasn't only about what you ate, but how you ate it, and the thought unsettled her. If her trusted papaya could turn against her with one wrong pairing, what other small habits were quietly burdening her body? The next morning, Zaria changed her routine. She still sliced her papaya, but this time she ate it alone. She took her time, noticing how light it felt, how her stomach didn't protest. For the first time in weeks, she finished breakfast without the shadow of unease. It was a small shift, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to her it felt like lifting a veil. She realized that the smallest adjustments, choosing when and how she ate, could restore balance. It wasn't about giving things up, but about listening to her body with the patience she had once reserved for others. As she washed the knife and set the seeds aside, Zaria smiled faintly. Her mornings were still hers, still filled with papaya. Only now they carried a quiet wisdom, the understanding that food, like life, demanded respect for its delicate pairings. She didn't yet know the full extent of what these discoveries would bring, but she sensed she was at the start of something important. A new way of caring for herself, one thoughtful bite at a time. It was a humid afternoon when Zaria noticed the papaya on her counter had gone soft, its skin freckled with dark spots. For years, she would have shrugged, cut it open, and eaten it anyway. Sweetest when it's soft, her husband used to say back when he was alive. But that day, something in her paused. She remembered the doctor's words about food turning against you, and for the first time she looked at the papaya not as a treat, but as a question. The smell was stronger than usual, almost sour. She wondered if the fruit she loved so much was beginning to betray her. That evening, her neighbor Mai stopped by with some herbs from her garden. Zaria offered her tea, and as they sat together, she shared her hesitation. "The papaya is so ripe it feels wrong to throw it away," she admitted, her voice tinged with guilt. Mai chuckled, shaking her head. "You know, my mother used to say that overripe papaya is no gift. It's poison to the stomach, sweet but sly." Zaria laughed at the phrasing, but later, when she cut into the fruit and smelled the fermented tang, Mai's words rang louder. She ate only a few bites before pushing it aside, uneasy. That night, her stomach told her the truth. A dull ache spread across her middle, and she tossed and turned until morning. The papaya she thought would nourish her had only unsettled her body. As she lay there, she realized how often she'd ignored the signs, the sour taste, the mushy flesh, the bubbles that hinted at fermentation. She had always told herself not to waste food, that she could handle it. But perhaps her body was asking her to stop carrying the burden of what was already spoiling. The next day, she walked to the market early. She chose her papayas with more care, firm, with just a little give, the skin golden but not collapsing. The vendor, a woman her age with a smile like sunlight, noticed her inspecting closely. "You know," the woman said, "the best papaya is the one that looks alive. If it smells too strong, let it go. Fruit teaches us patience." Zaria nodded, realizing she was learning to listen not only to her body but also to the fruit itself. When she returned home, she cut into the new papaya and felt relief in the freshness of its scent. It was clean, light, inviting. She ate it slowly, her heart calmer, her stomach grateful. There was no heaviness, no regret, just the simple sweetness she had first fallen in love with. For Zaria, this was more than a meal. It was a lesson in letting go. She didn't need to cling to what was already past its time. By choosing wisely, she wasn't wasting food, she was protecting her strength. That small shift became a quiet ritual. Every papaya she brought home, she touched, smelled, and listened to with care. She no longer saw it as just a fruit, but as a partner in her well-being. And in that gentle act of discernment, she began to understand something deeper. Aging wasn't about holding on to everything, it was about knowing what to release. The papaya taught her that, one ripe decision at a time. One Sunday afternoon, Zaria's family gathered at her home for lunch. The table was full, steamed rice, braised fish, stir-fried greens, and bowls of soup that filled the air with warmth. Zaria loved these moments. Laughter bounced between the walls, and she felt surrounded by love. After everyone had eaten their fill, she carried out a plate of neatly cut papaya slices, bright as jewels. "To help us digest," she said with a smile, placing it in the center of the table. It was a habit she had inherited from her husband, who always insisted papaya was the best way to end a heavy meal. At first, it felt harmless. Everyone reached for a piece, and the sweet taste seemed to wash down the salt of the fish and the spice of the greens. But only an hour later, as she washed the dishes, Zaria felt her belly swell uncomfortably. Gas rose in her chest, and she pressed a hand against her side, wishing she could ease the pressure. The fruit that was supposed to help her had turned into something else entirely. She forced a smile when her grandson came to kiss her goodbye, but once the door closed, she sat heavily in her chair, feeling both tired and betrayed by her own body. That evening, she called her daughter, who had also eaten the papaya but felt fine. "Maybe it's just me," Zaria said softly, embarrassed. Her daughter's voice was gentle on the line. "Mama, you've been more sensitive lately. Maybe it's not about the papaya itself, but when you eat it." The words stayed with her, and the next week she found herself asking her doctor during a routine checkup. He explained carefully, "Papaya works best when your stomach is not overwhelmed. After a big meal, the enzymes can't do their job properly. Instead, they compete with all the heavy food and cause fermentation. That's why you feel bloated." Zaria listened, her eyes widening with recognition. All those times she had blamed her age, her weak stomach, it had been the timing all along. She thought back to how light she had felt eating papaya alone in the morning, and suddenly it made sense. The fruit wasn't meant to be a chaser for indulgence, it was meant to be honored on its own. A companion to her body, not a burden piled on top of it. The following week, she made a new habit. Instead of serving papaya after meals, she placed it on a small plate in the morning when her kitchen was still quiet and the world outside barely stirred. She noticed the difference immediately. No heaviness, no gas, just a calm ease that spread through her body. She even had the energy to walk longer in the garden, humming softly as she watered her orchids. It was as if the papaya had returned to its rightful place in her life, not as an afterthought, but as a beginning. One afternoon, when her grandson asked why there was no papaya after lunch, Zaria smiled and told him, "Some things are best enjoyed on their own when your body is ready." He tilted his head, curious, and she realized she was passing on a lesson she herself had only just learned. In that moment, Zaria felt a quiet pride. She wasn't just healing herself, she was teaching her family the wisdom her own years had earned. The market that morning was alive with chatter and color. Zaria moved slowly between the stalls, her basket swinging at her side. She stopped at a vendor she trusted, who had stacked green papayas high in a neat pyramid. Their smooth, pale skins looked fresh and crisp. The vendor leaned in with a smile. "These are perfect for salad, madam. Very good for health." Zaria hesitated. She had always chosen the golden, ripe papayas, soft to the touch. But something about the vendor's words tempted her. She bought one, imagining how refreshing it would taste with lime and herbs on a hot day. That afternoon, she peeled the papaya herself. The knife slid through its firm flesh, and to her surprise, a milky white sap oozed where the skin broke. She frowned but thought little of it. She shredded the fruit thin, mixed it with carrots and a squeeze of lime, and sat down to eat. At first, it was crisp and bright, a welcome change from the usual sweetness of ripe papaya. But an hour later, her stomach cramped sharply. She doubled over, clutching her middle, shocked at the intensity of the pain. The rest of the day, nausea clung to her, and she felt betrayed by her own curiosity. When her daughter visited that evening, she found Zaria pale and tired on the sofa. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed. Zaria explained, embarrassed, about the green papaya salad. Her daughter's eyes softened with concern. "Mama, that white sap, it's latex. It can upset your stomach, especially raw." Zaria had heard of people being allergic to latex, but she never imagined it was hiding in her fruit. Later, at her doctor's office, she learned the truth. Green papaya needed proper handling. Cooking or fermenting neutralized the sap, but raw, it could irritate digestion badly. The knowledge humbled her. She thought of how often she had trusted appearances, believing freshness alone meant safety. The papaya had looked so clean, so harmless, and yet it carried something hidden beneath its skin. As she sat in the quiet of her living room that night, Zaria realized it was a lesson not just about food, but about life. Not everything was what it seemed. Sometimes the things that promised vitality could hurt you if you didn't understand their nature. From then on, Zaria treated green papaya with a kind of reverence. She asked her neighbor Mai to show her how to simmer it in soups, softening its bite and turning its latex harmless. In the steam of the kitchen, as she stirred the bubbling broth, Zaria felt relief in the knowledge that she could still enjoy new flavors safely. It wasn't about avoiding, it was about respecting. She learned to look beyond the surface, to prepare, to wait, to let time and care transform what was once risky into something nourishing. And slowly, she grew grateful. For the cramps that had warned her, for her daughter's gentle explanation, for the quiet wisdom her body kept offering if only she chose to listen. In the humble green papaya, Zaria had discovered another truth. Health wasn't about fear or restriction. It was about learning the language of what your body could accept and what it needed you to transform before letting it in. One quiet morning, Zaria decided to experiment. She had read in an old booklet that papaya seeds could cleanse the body and support the liver. Curious, she scooped a small spoonful of the peppery black seeds and chewed them with determination. Their bitterness surprised her, but she told herself that sometimes health required a little sacrifice. She followed it with a few slices of ripe papaya and settled into her chair by the window, expecting the usual lightness she had grown to love. But within half an hour, something felt wrong. A tingling spread across her lips, and a faint itch prickled her throat. She sipped water quickly, hoping it would pass, but the unease only deepened. Her tongue felt swollen, her breathing tight, and panic rose in her chest. She sat very still, whispering a small prayer, until the sensation slowly eased. It wasn't a full attack, nothing that sent her rushing to the hospital, but it was enough to shake her deeply. For the first time, she realized papaya might not always be her friend. That evening, her daughter insisted she see the doctor again. Sitting across from him, Zaria felt both embarrassed and afraid. The doctor listened carefully and nodded. "It sounds like a sensitivity to papin," he explained gently. "That's the enzyme in papaya that helps with digestion. For most people, it's healing, but for some, especially when concentrated in seeds or supplements, it can trigger allergic reactions." Zaria swallowed hard, remembering the fear of that morning. She had never thought of herself as someone who could be allergic to food, yet here was her body, telling her otherwise. Back home, she sat in her kitchen and stared at the half-empty papaya on her counter. She thought about how easily she might have ignored those signals, the itch, the swelling, the tightness, all whispers from her body asking her to be careful. For years, she had prided herself on enduring discomfort, brushing off aches and signs as part of aging. But maybe aging wasn't about ignoring, it was about finally listening. Her body, she realized, wasn't betraying her. It was guiding her, asking for respect. Over the following weeks, Zaria made a new promise to herself. She wouldn't stop eating papaya, but she would pay closer attention. She would avoid the seeds, no matter what she had read about their supposed powers. She would eat slowly, watching for how her body responded, and she would not dismiss even the smallest signals. It wasn't about fear, it was about trust, learning to trust the quiet wisdom that her body carried. One afternoon, when her grandson asked why she no longer added papaya seeds to her smoothies, Zaria smiled and said, "Because my body asked me not to." He laughed, not fully understanding, but she felt a warmth in her chest. To name it so simply gave her strength. For the first time, she felt like her health was not something fragile to protect, but something alive she could partner with. Every meal became an act of listening, every bite a dialogue. And in that gentle conversation, Zaria discovered a new kind of safety, one born not of control, but of care. The sky outside Zaria's window was still gray when she rose. The air was cool and her house rested in silence. For years, she had woken early, but this morning felt different. On her kitchen counter sat a ripe papaya she had chosen carefully the day before, firm, golden, with a sweet, clean scent. She washed her hands, sliced it open, and scooped out the seeds, setting them aside. This time, she wasn't rushing, nor was she afraid. She placed the slices neatly on a plate, sat at her small wooden table, and let the morning light fall across her face. Her doctor had once explained that papaya was best enjoyed on an empty stomach, when its enzymes could work freely, easing digestion and cleansing gently. Zaria had listened, but it was only now that she felt the truth of it. As she took the first bite, the sweetness was brighter, more alive than she remembered. The fruit seemed to settle in her stomach with ease, leaving her feeling lighter, as though her body had been waiting for this moment. There was no heaviness, no cramping, no unease, only a quiet harmony that spread outward like a soft song. She thought back to all she had learned, the spoiled papaya she once forced herself to eat, the bloating after heavy meals, the painful lesson with green fruit, the frightening reaction to the seeds. Each step had felt like a setback, but now she understood. They were not punishments, but teachers. Her body had been guiding her all along, showing her where balance lived and where it did not. She smiled at the thought that even a simple fruit could carry so many lessons, if only she slowed down long enough to listen. Later that morning, her daughter came by and found her humming softly in the garden, watering the orchids. "You look brighter today, Mama," she said with surprise. Zaria laughed, wiping her hands on her apron. "I ate my papaya at dawn, and it felt like medicine." Her daughter tilted her head, curious, and Zaria told her about the difference it made, how her stomach felt lighter, her mind clearer. She spoke not like someone sharing a health tip, but like a woman passing down wisdom carved from her own journey. By the afternoon, Zaria noticed something small but powerful. She no longer feared her food. She no longer looked at papaya with suspicion or doubt. Instead, she saw it as a companion, one that could heal when honored, one that could harm when neglected. She felt a deep gratitude that she had learned to walk this path with awareness, to choose not only what to eat, but how to eat it. In those quiet choices, she found strength, not the strength of youth, but the deeper, steadier strength of a woman who had learned to trust herself again. As the day ended, Zaria sat on her porch, watching the sun fall behind the trees. She thought about how life, much like papaya, carried sweetness and hidden risks, and how wisdom was simply learning which was which. She rested her hand on her lap, content. Tomorrow morning, she would slice another papaya. She would eat slowly, gratefully, with the same patience she was learning to give herself. And in that simple act, she knew she was not just nourishing her body, she was renewing her spirit, one quiet morning at a time. The seasons began to change, and with them, Zaria noticed something new in herself. Where once her mornings had been hurried and routine, they now carried a kind of ritual, almost sacred. Each day, she began with a slice of papaya, chosen with care, eaten with gratitude, and welcomed like an old friend. What was once just food had become something deeper, a teacher she could lean on, a companion that reminded her of balance. Her neighbors sometimes teased her. "Zaria, you talk about papaya as if it's a person," they laughed, but she only smiled because in a way it was true. The fruit had been with her through discomfort and discovery, through mistakes and renewal. It had shown her that life after 60 was not about fear of what could go wrong, but about curiosity for what could still go right. One morning, as she prepared breakfast for her daughter and grandson, she noticed how naturally her new habits had taken root. She no longer served papaya after heavy meals. She no longer let it sit until it spoiled. She no longer ignored the signs her body whispered to her. Instead, she honored her food, her body, and her years with gentleness. Watching her grandson bite into a slice, his face lighting up with sweetness, she felt a quiet joy. She was not only caring for herself, she was passing on a piece of wisdom that would outlive her. By evening, as the sun dipped low, Zaria often found herself reflecting. She had not discovered the fountain of youth, nor had she escaped the truths of aging. But she had found something perhaps even greater, peace with her body, a peace that came from listening, from choosing, from respecting. And in that peace, she felt strong again, not because she was unshakable, but because she knew how to care for the fragile parts of herself with tenderness. As she closed her eyes that night, she whispered a thank you, not just to papaya, but to the journey itself. The mistakes, the discomfort, the lessons, the mornings renewed. They had all led her here to a place of balance and quiet strength. And she knew that tomorrow, with another slice of fruit and another sunrise, her journey of health and wisdom would continue, one gentle step, one mindful bite at a time. Weeks turned into months, and Zaria's new rhythm became second nature. She no longer thought of it as managing her diet or avoiding mistakes. Instead, it was simply life, simple, quiet choices that brought her steadiness. Friends began to notice. One commented on how clear her skin looked, another on the calmness in her voice, and still another on her steady energy when she walked through the market. Zaria would laugh gently, never boasting. "It's just small things," she'd say, though deep down she knew those small things had changed everything. One afternoon, her neighbor Mai stopped by, carrying a bundle of herbs. She sat with Zaria in the garden, listening as the older woman spoke about her new routine. Mai shook her head with a smile. "You've turned Papaya into a teacher," she said warmly. Zaria smiled back, realizing how true that sounded. Through each mistake, each moment of discomfort, she had learned to live more slowly, more attentively. And that attentiveness had spread beyond food. It touched the way she cared for her plants, the way she listened to her daughter, the way she spoke to herself with kindness. Her grandson, too, began to notice. One morning, he asked her, "Grandma, why do you always eat papaya first thing?" She cupped his small hand and replied, "Because it reminds me that the way you begin matters. If you start gently, the whole day follows." He nodded, storing the answer in the quiet place where children keep the wisdom of their elders. Zaria realized in that moment that her journey was no longer just hers. She was shaping the memory of health and care for those who came after her. In time, she began sharing her story more openly with friends at her community gatherings. Some of them had battled indigestion, others felt weak or burdened by food that no longer sat well with them. Zaria didn't speak like a teacher. She spoke like a companion, telling them about the overripe papaya, the heavy meal mistake, the green fruit surprise, the allergy scare. Each story carried a piece of her heart, and each friend nodded as though hearing their own struggles reflected back. Together they laughed, sighed, and promised to treat their bodies with a little more patience. By the time the year closed, Zaria understood that her journey wasn't about papaya alone. It was about learning to care for herself without shame. She had carried her lessons gently, and now she shared them freely. Sitting on her porch as the evening light faded, she felt a sense of fullness that had nothing to do with food. It was the fullness of knowing she had turned her trials into wisdom, her fear into gentleness, her meals into moments of grace. And as the stars rose, she whispered a quiet promise to herself, to keep honoring the small choices, to keep listening, and to keep passing on what she had learned so no one else would have to walk the same uncertain path alone. The sun was low when Zaria walked into the community hall, a small notebook tucked beneath her arm. A friend had invited her to join a group for seniors where they shared recipes, remedies, and stories from their kitchens. She hesitated at first, shy about speaking in front of others, but when her turn came, she took a deep breath and opened the notebook. "I used to think papaya was simple," she began softly. "Sweet fruit, easy to eat, but it taught me things I didn't expect." The room quieted as she spoke. She told them about the mornings when papaya made her feel light and strong, but also about the afternoons when it had left her doubled over with discomfort. She spoke about the mistake of eating it after heavy meals, the cramps from raw green papaya, the fear when her throat tingled from the seeds. At first, her voice trembled, but as she went on, it steadied. She noticed nods around the room, people recognizing their own struggles in her words. By the time she finished, there was laughter, sympathy, and even relief. She realized she wasn't alone. Afterward, one woman came to her with tears in her eyes. "I thought something was wrong with me," she admitted. "I never knew papaya could do that." Another leaned in and whispered, "You gave me courage to listen to my body again." Zaria felt warmth spread through her chest. What had once been private discomfort had become a gift, something she could offer to others. She left the hall lighter than she had entered, her heart full of a quiet pride. In the weeks that followed, Zaria began writing down her experiences in more detail, not as rules or lessons, but as stories, little windows into her daily life. She described the morning sunlight on her table, the smell of fresh fruit, the way her stomach felt calm or unsettled depending on her choices. She didn't think of herself as an author, yet the words flowed as if they had been waiting for her all along. Sometimes her daughter would read a page and smile. "Mama, you should share this with more people," she encouraged. And Zaria would nod, feeling both shy and hopeful. One evening, as she set her pen down, she realized what had changed most in her life wasn't papaya at all. It was her relationship with herself. For decades, she had pushed aside her body's signals, convincing herself she was strong enough to endure anything. But now she knew strength was not in ignoring pain. It was in listening with tenderness, and that tenderness was something she could pass on, not just to her family, but to anyone who needed it. As she closed her notebook and blew out the lamp, Zaria whispered a quiet truth to herself. "My story is not just mine anymore. It belongs to others too." And in that moment, she felt her journey expand beyond her kitchen, beyond her own life, into something larger. Her small lessons, born from a single fruit, had become seeds of wisdom she could scatter generously, trusting they would grow where they were needed most. One Saturday morning, Zaria's grandson, Elias, came to stay with her while his parents ran errands. At 8 years old, he was full of restless energy, bouncing from chair to chair, asking questions about everything in sight. As Zaria prepared breakfast, he tugged at her sleeve. "Grandma, can I help?" She handed him a small knife, guiding his little hands as they sliced the papaya together. He wrinkled his nose at the slippery seeds. "Why do you always save these, Grandma?" Zaria chuckled softly. "Because even the seeds carry lessons," she said. She explained gently that while papaya was good for her, the seeds were too strong for her body. "I learned the hard way," she admitted, telling him the story of the morning when her throat had itched and her chest had grown tight. Elias's eyes widened. "Did it scare you?" She nodded. "Yes, it did. But fear teaches us too. It taught me to listen." Later, as they sat together on the porch, Elias bit into his slice of papaya, juice dripping down his chin. "Grandma, why do you eat this in the morning and not after lunch like we do at home?" She looked at him thoughtfully. "Because the morning is when your body is most ready. If you give it something light and kind, the whole day feels easier. After a heavy meal, papaya can't do its job. It just makes you heavy too." Elias tilted his head, trying to imagine food as a helper instead of just something to fill his belly. That afternoon, when his parents returned, Elias ran to them with excitement. "Did you know you shouldn't eat papaya after lunch? Grandma says it works better in the morning," his mother laughed, glancing at Zaria. But Zaria only smiled, her heart swelling with quiet joy. She hadn't meant to teach him, not really. She had only shared a piece of herself, and yet he had carried it away like a treasure. In the quiet that followed, Zaria realized something profound. The wisdom she had gained wasn't meant to stop with her. It was meant to ripple outward, shaping the lives of those she loved. Elias might forget some of the details, but he would remember the way his grandmother's kitchen smelled of fruit in the morning, the way she spoke gently about listening to the body, the way health could feel like a kind of love. As the sun dipped lower, Zaria watched her grandson chase butterflies in the garden, his laughter filling the air. She thought of the generations that had come before her, her mother warning her not to mix certain foods, her grandmother teaching her patience with ripening fruit. Now it was her turn to carry the thread forward, weaving her story into the fabric of her family's future. And she felt, perhaps for the first time, that aging was not a fading away, but a passing down. Her lessons were not hers alone. They were gifts, carried in fruit, in memory, in the hearts of those who would live long after she was gone. Zaria's story began with something so small, something she never imagined could shift her life, a slice of papaya. At first she believed it was only food, harmless and familiar, yet through moments of discomfort, fear, and quiet discovery, she came to see that what mattered wasn't just what she ate, but how she welcomed it into her life. Her first transformation came when she stopped ignoring her body's signals. No longer did she brush aside the tightness in her chest or the cramps in her stomach. She learned instead to listen, gently, patiently, trusting that her body was always whispering what it needed. The second transformation was even deeper. Zaria began to see her choices not as restrictions, but as gifts. By choosing when to eat papaya, how ripe it should be, and what foods to pair it with, she found a balance that gave her back energy, lightness, and peace. What once felt like trial and error became a daily ritual, a way of showing care for herself in every bite. And through sharing her story, she discovered that these lessons were not hers alone. They became seeds of wisdom for her daughter, her grandson, and even her neighbors. Perhaps that is the invitation for us all, to slow down enough to notice how our bodies respond, to honor the small rituals that bring us comfort, and to let go of the habits that quietly weigh us down. Like Zaria, we can learn that health isn't about chasing perfection, it's about listening, choosing with care, and finding joy in the simplest of mornings. And so may her story remind you that it is never too late to change, never too late to listen, and never too late to begin again, with gentleness, with gratitude, and with hope for the days ahead.